The chaotic rhythm of a downtown Boston coffee shop suddenly broke. A young woman, hair pulled back, was desperately trying to order, but her hand gestures were fumbling and desperate, confusing the busy barista. The queue behind her grumbled loudly. "What's wrong with her?" The woman wearing discreet hearing aids instantly slumped, her eyes welling up with searing shame. Her head dropped low in defeat. Just then, a man stepped forward, touching her shoulder with exquisite gentleness. His hands began to move in fluid, silent arcs. "It's all right, I understand. Take your time." She looked up. The resulting smile, bright, pure, and utterly surprised, was a beacon of sunlight. Daniel Brooks, at 36, was built of quiet focus and contained strength, the kind required to be both a single father and a highly skilled audio systems technician. His professional life was defined by precision, fixing the complex wiring that brought sound to life, restoring clarity to the broken static. His heart, however, belonged entirely to his 7-year-old daughter, Mia, a whirl of kinetic energy and endless, inquisitive questions about the color and shape of the world. Daniel's unique, silent language, American Sign Language, or ASL, was a sacred family legacy. Years ago, his late mother, who was deaf, had taught him every intricate movement, every nuanced expression. Even after her passing, Daniel kept the tradition alive, signing with Mia every evening as a private, silent ritual, a family language that bonded them in its profound quiet. Their life was simple, predictable, and deeply satisfying, built on the solid foundation of their mutual, unbreakable love. The woman he just approached was Alara Winters, 28, a freelance graphic designer whose entire brilliant career was built on visual harmony. She saw color as sound, translating emotional vibrations into stunning visual concepts. She was a master artist who heard the world with her eyes. Losing her hearing at 12, following a devastating bout of brain fever, had shaped her into a fiercely independent adult. Yet despite her grace and sharp intellect, every social interaction was a grueling internal battle. She hated the looks of pity, the condescending tones, and most of all, the impatient, visible frustration of strangers when communication inevitably failed. She hated being perceived as slow. She preferred the solitude of her studio, where she reigned supreme over light and color. This morning, the mission was small, one simple small latte to fuel her tight deadline. Yet the high-pressure environment of the cafe transformed the simple task into a sprawling disaster of anxiety. She attempted to sign small latte, low sugar, her movements tense and rushed. The barista, overwhelmed and completely unversed in ASL, interpreted her hurried hand gestures as frantic panic, not language. "Ma'am, I don't know what you want," the employee sighed, rubbing their temples, exasperation thinly veiled. A man in line, tapping his foot with aggressive impatience, leaned in and muttered, loud enough for Alara to read his lips across the counter. "So annoying." The insult, though merely whispered, struck Alara like a physical blow. Her face flushed a painful crimson. Her hands, usually steady and articulate on her drawing tablet, began to tremble uncontrollably, retreating back toward her body in self-defense. She was on the verge of turning and fleeing the scene, of simply abandoning the coffee, the shame, and the public space altogether. Daniel, standing directly behind her, had observed the entire heartbreaking exchange. As an ASL speaker, he instantly recognized her tense, rushed signing, and saw how her distress was causing her to transpose a crucial sign, confusing the barista even more. He stepped in, not with pity or drama, but with immediate focused purpose. His hand settled on her shoulder, a gentle, non-invasive weight that was simply a request for permission to help. When she turned, she met his blue eyes that held no judgment, only perfect calm. He used a clear, deliberate sign. "I understand. May I assist you?" Alara froze. Her eyes, a shimmering shade of hazel, widened in disbelief. It was an unexpected, spontaneous miracle in a world that never bent its rules for her. She could only nod, her hands dropping entirely, resting the heavy burden of communication on him. Daniel turned to the barista, his voice calm, firm, and authoritative, cutting through the general din of the cafe. She would like a small latte, with low sugar, please. The issue vanished. The tension evaporated. The transaction was completed in 3 seconds. Ilara stared at Daniel, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm of relief and awe. She signed rapidly, her hands now moving with fluid grace and relief. Thank you. You know ASL. Daniel smiled easily, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. I used it to talk to my mother. It's a beautiful, honest language. Suddenly Mia, who had been patiently observing the silent conversation, tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, her signing is prettier than yours. She moves her hands like dancing. Ilara let out a surprised, delighted laugh that radiated from her entire face, a pure, silent, joyous burst of emotion. It was the first time all day, or perhaps all week, that the painful, crushing weight of her deafness had completely lifted. She felt seen. She felt included. Daniel, gathering his and Mia's order, prepared to leave. Ilara hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then, driven by an urgency she couldn't explain, she walked over to their small, quiet table. She signed, her fingers trembling slightly with courage. May I join you? Daniel simply smiled and gestured to the empty seat beside Mia. A regular customer, overhearing the small commotion, later posted an observation online. I've seen that woman in here before, always isolated, always struggling. I had never seen her smile. That single dad walked up and made her burst into a genuine, radiant laugh in less than 30 seconds. He was her quiet anchor. It was the most purely human interaction I've witnessed all year. The three of them settled into a comfortable corner table, Mia absolutely fascinated by the silent conversation unfolding between the two adults. She watched their hands, darting and weaving, creating beautiful, rapid shapes in the air, a mesmerizing form of hand dancing, as she'd labeled it. Daniel started the conversation. What kind of work consumes your focus, Ilara? Ilara's hands responded fluidly, her movements graceful and descriptive. I am a freelance graphic designer. I translate complex ideas into striking visuals. For me, color is exactly like sound. I hear the world with my eyes, taking the raw emotion of a piece and giving it a visible, compelling shape. She made a sophisticated sign that meant abstract sound, holding her hand near her ear before forming a beautiful, expressive spiral in the air. Daniel's expression shifted from appreciation to genuine, immediate admiration. That's truly incredible. I repair the intricate systems that generate and amplify sound. I fix the source. You capture the spirit. We surprisingly complement each other perfectly. Ilara covered her mouth and laughed, a silent, full-body gesture of delight. The familiar tension, which had been a constant, burning knot in her shoulders, finally began to melt away under the warmth of his easy, equalizing presence. She felt disarmed. They talked for almost an hour, quickly diving past the safe, surface-level topics. Ilara, urged on by the unthreatening nature of their silent exchange, began to articulate her deepest, most guarded anxieties. She signed rapidly, her brows furrowed slightly. I live in a constant state of hypervigilance. I dread crowded places. I'm always terrified of missing someone calling my name. Or worse, that I'll be misunderstood, labeled as slow, or merely an embarrassing inconvenience. She stopped, signing the word inconvenience with a sharp, self-dismissive motion. Daniel listened, his blue eyes unwavering, absorbing every word without offering a single flicker of pity. He didn't interrupt her shame. When she was done, he signed a response that struck her to the core of her identity. His movements were slow, deliberate, and undeniably powerful. You are immensely strong, Ilara. Living in a world of profound silence, yet you have taught yourself to hear with such visual clarity. You've become a master of a visual world. You have refused to surrender your independence to circumstances. That is not weakness. That is pure, undeniable resilience. Ilara gazed at him, her heart swelling with an emotion so powerful it felt like a physical ache. She was used to being told she was brave, but always with a hint of sorrow. Daniel offered her a truth that acknowledged the fight, not just the condition. Mia, sensing a perfect moment to jump back in, interjected with a clumsy, yet adorable attempt at ASL. She signed, completely misforming the letters, but making her meaning perfectly clear. I am Mia, I like coffee shop. Ilara's face lit up again. She used proper, beautiful ASL to respond with warmth. Hello, Mia. It is wonderful to meet you. You are a very curious girl. Daniel then asked, do you come to this cafe often, Ilara? Or are you a hidden gem? A shadow passed over her face. No, I actively avoid crowds. Crowds are too loud, too chaotic, too dangerous for me. This morning I was forced to come here for a mandated meeting close by. Her lips trembled slightly as she finished the thought. And I despise the feeling of being exposed and confused in a place I can't control. Daniel reached out and gently tapped her forearm, a gesture of simple, solid reassurance. But you faced it. You walked in, and you tried. You were incredibly brave today, Ilara. You conquered a personal fear just to get a cup of coffee. She lowered her gaze, two faint blushes coloring her cheeks. He saw her and accepted her, completely. He didn't require her to be perfect. As Daniel gathered his and Mia's things preparing to leave, he paused. He looked directly at Ilara and signed a farewell that was also a profound offer of future connection. If you need any help at all during the week, a simple phone call, a confusing form, or just a little silent company, text me anytime. Ilara's hands, typically so decisive, hovered in the air, hesitant to accept such an intimate, spontaneous gift. She signed back, her movements tentative. Are you sure? I truly don't want to be a burden on your busy life. His signing was immediate, confident, and final. Absolutely sure. It would be my genuine pleasure to know I was helping someone so determined. Ilara left the cafe moments later, her steps lighter than they had been in years. Her heart was racing, a feeling of vibrant, nervous anticipation she hadn't dared to dream of since her life went silent. That night, alone in her quiet apartment, she stared at an unfinished design project. But her focus was gone, replaced by the memory of Daniel's warm smile and a pair of kind, articulate hands signing in the air. She picked up her phone and sent a short text. Thank you, Daniel. My whole day was immeasurably better because of you. His reply was instant, cutting through the silence of her phone. Every single day of yours deserves to be beautiful, Ilara. One of the cafe employees, noticing the pattern, later admitted, I saw her come back 3 separate times that day. She'd pretend to order water, but she was definitely looking around to see if that single dad was coming back. She was clearly waiting for her quiet hero to reappear. It was like watching someone wait for their own sunshine. 3 days later, the burgeoning connection led them to a late lunch near the Boston waterfront. The conversation flowed easily, a beautiful, evolving ballet of sign language and quiet laughter. They spoke of life's complex architecture, Daniel's past in audio engineering, his hopes for Mia's future, and Ilara's childhood dreams before the silence descended. Crucially, Daniel never once focused on her hearing loss. He treated her as a fully equal, brilliant woman with a distinct, beautiful language. Ilara found herself relaxing completely, believing for the first time that this man truly saw her through a lens of normalcy, not a pane of glass labeled disabled. She began to trust him implicitly. But later that evening, fate intervened with a brutal, terrifying reminder of the precariousness of her silent existence. They were walking home, engrossed in a signed conversation about a new piece of technology Ilara was designing. As they stepped into a busy crosswalk, ignoring the flashing red hand, a reckless, speeding driver in a black sedan attempted to run the light, accelerating wildly toward them. The massive blaring horn of the car, the universal sound of mortal danger, was an invisible force, a signal Ilara could not perceive. Daniel's head snapped up. His eyes, trained by years of battlefield experience as a medic, registered the car's velocity and their fatal position in a single terrifying instant. Ilara! He screamed, a primal cry of pure, desperate warning that hit the deaf air uselessly. She didn't hear him. She kept signing, smiling at her own joke. Without a second's hesitation, Daniel lunged forward. He grabbed her by the shoulders, twisting and pulling her violently into the safety of his chest. The force of the movement sent them both sprawling onto the curb, just as the car roared past them. its side mirror missing their heads by mere agonizing inches. Screams erupted from bystanders. The entire world seemed to stop, suspended in the aftermath of noise and danger. Ilara lay on the ground, hyperventilating. The sheer visual speed of the car, the sudden, violent impact, and the contagious panic radiating from the witnesses around them plunged her into a catastrophic shock. Her whole body began to tremble uncontrollably. She signed frantically, her hands shaking so violently the message was almost illegible with fear. "I'm so scared. I'm terrified. I thought I was absolutely dead." Daniel didn't speak. He didn't move away. He rolled slightly and pulled her against his chest, cradling her, shielding her from the chaotic world. He held her with a fierce, protective tightness, his own breath ragged. Then gently, purposefully, he began to sign simple, powerful words against her back, a tactile reassurance that was the only thing capable of grounding her in the moment. "S-away, efiki," he signed, his fingers moving slowly and methodically against the soft fabric of her sweater. "I'm Hereyouareok." His steady, warm touch, the slow, rhythmic signing on her skin, was the only thing holding her together. The panic slowly subsided, replaced by a profound, agonizing relief. She buried her face into the collar of his jacket and wept silent, devastating tears, the full, crushing weight of her silent vulnerability finally escaping her. They remained there for a long time, Daniel never letting go, until her breathing returned to normal and the crowd dispersed. Later that evening, he walked her back to her apartment. They stood at her door, the air thick with unspoken, defining emotion. Ilara reached out, her hand resting on his arm. She signed slowly, every movement charged with heartfelt sincerity and gratitude. "If you hadn't been there today, if you hadn't risked your life, I don't want to continue that thought." Daniel looked at her, his expression tender and knowing. He reached up, touching her cheek with his thumb, wiping away a tear. Then he signed a truth that eclipsed all her previous insecurities and fears. "You deserve to be protected, Ilara, not because you are weak, you are not, but simply because someone cares about you, truly and completely." Ilara's eyes, filled with the reflected light of the hallway, held an entire world of gratitude and burgeoning love. The walls she had spent years building around her heart crumbled in that moment. The near tragedy became a powerful, undeniable catalyst. Their connection deepened rapidly, transforming into an urgent, vital dependence. Ilara, finally trusting him with her life, invited Daniel to her inner sanctum, her design studio. It was a sun-drenched space, vibrant with mood boards, color swatches, and half-finished illustrations. A symphony of light. She signed, gesturing around the room with passionate pride. "This is my music. These colors are the melodies I hear, the rhythms I feel in the silence." Daniel signed back, his hands moving with quiet, profound intensity. "Then you are my music, Ilara. You are the vibrant, crucial melody that finally broke the silence in my life, the color that fills my world." Ilara's vision blurred. Tears, not of sadness or fear, but of overwhelming joy and realization, spilled down her face. This was it. She was loved and fully understood, not through the clumsy medium of spoken language, but through the clarity and devotion of sight and touch. Inspired by this pure, silent love, she felt an incredible surge of courage, the ultimate surrender of her protective silence. She looked at Daniel and took a deep, shuddering breath. "Daniel, I want to say this to you, in my real voice." She reached up, pressed the activation button on her voice assistance device, and gathered every ounce of strength and courage she possessed. Her throat tight, her voice shaky and unused, she spoke his name for the first time in her life. Neil." Daniel's expression softened into an agonizing tenderness. His own throat constricted. He choked on the emotion. He signed back instantly, his hand touching his heart, his eyes glistening. "My name has never, ever sounded more beautiful than it did just now." They embraced amidst the quiet light of the studio, a silent storm of emotion and devotion swirling around them. A neighbor who saw them return that night and later witnessed their increasing closeness commented, That beautiful deaf girl. I saw her laugh constantly after the accident. She smiled with a radiance I'd never seen. It was like she had finally found a new language for life, and it wasn't sound at all. It was love. The relationship solidified quickly, growing into a beautiful, quiet certainty. Elara needed to thank Mia, to acknowledge the small diplomat who had first broken the ice and allowed her to open her heart. Their meeting was full of joy. Mia, though still adorably clumsy with her signing, had been diligently practicing her letters. She ran up to Elara and signed with earnest, endearing mistakes and beaming concentration. "You are beautiful." Elara laughed, a clear, silent wave of happiness, and pulled the small girl into a tight, grateful hug. The three of them fell into the easy, natural rhythm of a family unit, a perfect, quiet trinity of mutual support and affection. Elara, with her natural artistic flair, taught Mia how to sign butterfly and constellation, gently correcting Daniel's own rusty technique with affectionate tutelage. One quiet evening, Elara arrived at Daniel's apartment with a slim, leather-bound sketchbook. She handed it to him, her hand signing a simple, "A gift for you, for your wall." Inside, the pages weren't filled with client work, but with vibrant watercolor illustrations of him and Mia. There was an illustration of Daniel fixing a circuit board, a tiny bolt of lightning sparking from his hand, a testament to his talent. Another showed Mia in her favorite yellow raincoat, looking up at the rain with wide, curious eyes. The final page was a powerful, moving portrait of the three of them sitting at the coffee shop table, their hands frozen mid-sign, framed by a halo of warm, inviting light. Daniel traced the contours of the drawing, his throat tight with overwhelming emotion. "Elara, this is stunning. You captured the light that holds us together." She signed back instantly, her face alight with sincerity. "Because you truly are filled with light and color. You showed me the beauty I was missing in the world, the beauty of being utterly seen." Daniel closed the sketchbook and set it aside. This moment was no longer about gratitude or fear. It was about the profound, undeniable architecture of their shared future. He took her hands, holding them tightly, grounding her completely in his presence. He raised his hands, his movements slow, deliberate, and entirely devoted, a public, signed declaration for the world to witness. He signed, his index finger pointing firmly to his chest. "Choose," he signed, his hands moving with firm, unshakable resolution. "You," he signed, his index finger pointing straight to her heart. "I choose you." Elara's breath hitched. Tears, the beautiful silent tears of overwhelming realization, streamed down her face. She placed her hands over her chest, signing back the only truth that mattered. Her hands, though trembling with the depth of her emotion, moved with perfect clarity. "And I, Choose." She paused, pointing directly to her own beating heart and then to his. "This place." Daniel pulled her into a powerful embrace, crushing the distance between them. There were no more words to be spoken, no more apologies to offer for their past lives, no more fears to confess. There was only the solid, undeniable reality of their present and the promise of their future. He was the sound that anchored her. She was the silence that calmed him. "From this day forward, I choose to look a little longer at the quiet moments. I choose kindness over ambition. I choose forever over the next quarterly report." 1 month later, their relationship, forged in crisis and trust, had reached its final, beautiful inflection point. Daniel drove Elara to a quiet suburban street, stopping outside the charming, slightly aged house he grew up in. It was his childhood home, the very place where his late mother had first taught him the silent, intricate language that would one day connect him to his soulmate. They stepped inside. The house was peaceful, imbued with the profound, comforting quietness of memory. Elara walked over to a mantelpiece where a framed photograph of Daniel's mother rested. The woman in the photo, whose hands had first shaped Daniel's communication, smiled gently. Elara reached out, placing her hand softly over the image. Then her hands began to move, signing a deeply personal, solemn vow to the memory of the woman who had made their love possible. "I will love your son," she signed, her eyes glistening with devotion. With everything I have, and I will always keep your language alive. Daniel, standing behind her, felt his throat tighten, overwhelmed by the depth of her promise. His mother's legacy was now complete. At that moment, Mia burst into the room, her hair flying, carrying a stack of coloring books. She looked from her father to Alara and signed the simple, pivotal question that held their entire future. Is Alara our family yet, Daddy? Is she going to be my new best friend forever? Alara looked at Daniel, her heart open, waiting for his final, public confirmation. Daniel stepped forward, taking Alara's hand in his own. He looked at his daughter, then at the woman he loved. He signed the words slowly, declaring them not just to the two people in the room, but to the memory of his mother and the entire world. His hands moved with the sacred certainty of a man building a new, unbreakable foundation. W.E., he signed, circling his hand to include all three of them. A.R.E., he signed, confirming the state of being. F.A.M.I.L.Y. Alara let out a choked cry, tears of profound happiness finally overcoming her composure. She pulled Daniel and Mia into a fierce, joyous, three-way hug. That night they ate dinner together. The quiet house now filled with the clatter of forks, the gentle, rhythmic motion of signing, Mia's uninhibited laughter, and the overwhelming, beautiful sound of new life. The place that was once defined by silence and loss was now defined by connection and love. The man who used sign language to reach a deaf woman's heart, the most beautiful love story to emerge from Boston this year, a quiet triumph of connection over communication barriers. If you believe stories about second chances, the true meaning of strength and unconditional love deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten. What quiet gesture changed your life?